Alright, so I thought I'd do a quick mod tutorial of Space Engineers. And I thought I'd do like a basic, pretty much the most basic mod that you can do, which is taking something that's there and tweaking it a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually not going to be in Space Engineers. I'm going to go and dig for my Space Engineers folder. So most people have it installed on their C drive. I put mine off on a separate drive with all my games. Let's see here. So wherever your Steam folder is, Steam Apps, Common, and Space Engineers. Now, I've been in the alpha for just over a year, and one of the things I've gotten in the habit of doing, and I think other people probably should as well, is making some backup copies. So patch day is Thursday, and I'll go through on either just before the patch or maybe on like Wednesday night, and I'll make a backup copy of my Space Engineers folders. Now I've only got 5 here, but I also have offline external patches going all the way back to actually that should be 01 041. So that's quite a ways back. So that goes back to June of last year, even though it says 2015. It's because I copied it. And the reason I do this is because when they patch the game, sometimes they break things, and sometimes they break things bad. That's kind of the price you pay for alpha, but it also makes it hard to play and frustrating if you're trying to do something and some major feature that you were working on is broken. So this is kind of a habit I got into, and one of the nice things is sometimes they take features away. Give you a good example. They added a feature somewhere in here, I think, where you could spawn asteroids in manually, and they would spawn with resources. And then they took that feature away when they did the procedurally generated asteroids. So if you were trying to make custom maps, well, you were kind of stuck. But I could go back, revert to an older version, and go, spawn a map, spawn asteroids, and I was still able to do that for a few weeks, whereas other people couldn't. Another thing that came up was one of the multiplayer servers that I played on, dedicated server, had run out of asteroid material, and they didn't have any way to get asteroids in. So I went, loaded up an older version, spawned a bunch of asteroids off, and sent the admin all the files, and he was able to repopulate and fill up some new areas on the server with fresh asteroids for new players. So just kind of one of those things to keep in mind. But what we're going to do is we're actually going to go into the Space Engineers folder and into content. And then over here, I'm going to go into my user folder. And this is where Space Engineers stores their data. And I'm going to be looking for users, my username, and something. Where is it? App data, which is hidden by default. You can also come up here and just go and write app data in between 2% signs, and it'll take you right there. And that goes into app data roaming, actually. So I also occasionally will go through and back up my save folder or my Space Engineers data folder. Um, that way I have backup copies of mods, backup copies of saves. If something goes massively wrong and files get corrupted, I have something I can go back to. So inside that Space Engineers folder is a folder called mods. And I've got quite a bit of mods. The folders that are in here are local mods. These will only run from your local machine. You can't use them in dedicated server, you can't use them in multiplayer. But if you're developing a mod, this is what you'll see. These other files, these are SBM files. These are actually the mod files that are located in the workshop. And when you add a mod to a game, load the game, it downloads the mod from the workshop and places it in here. So this number is actually the ID of that workshop mod. So let's say, for instance, let's see, I'll grab one of mine. Move this over here so you can see. So let's see, we'll go to my content and workshop items, and do my materials and components mod. So up here you have this ID. So if you go here, copy that ID, and I want to paste it in here and look for it, eventually it pops up. So this is in that mods folder. I'll right click it and say open file location. Takes me right back to the mods folder and highlights it for me. So this, I have a local version of this mod. Once I uploaded it and subscribed to it, and then included the subscribed version instead of the local version in a world, it will then download this mod and store it. This can be handy if you're using a mod that gets taken down either by the author or for whatever reason, and it breaks your ships. What you can do is you can come in here, make yourself a little copy, just paste it back into itself, and now I have that mod, and I can rename this. Let's see, workshop, materials, components, and you want to change the extension to .zip. So now I have a zip file, and if I open this zip file or extract it, see, I'll extract it to workshop mats and comps. All the way back up to the top, and now I have a folder that has the mod. So if you want to see how someone else did something or put something together, this is one way to do it. Also, if you lose your originals, this is one way to recover some of the information. So what we're going to do, though, is we're going to create a new mod. So go into our mods folder, create a new folder. We'll call it mod tutorial. And to make it easy and make it show up at the top of the list, let's actually call it 0 mod tutorial. But it has nothing in it. So I said we're going to do an easy mod. And one of the easiest mods is just to create a new mod that modifies some existing function. One of the first ones that was done were the skyboxes, which I think is kind of ironic. that they don't work in DirectX 11 yet. But anyway, so what we want to do is we want to copy over just the bits and pieces that we need to make our modification. We don't necessarily need to copy everything over, and we don't even need to copy entire files. We will, but we're going to remove all of what we don't need. So let's see, what would be a good thing to try? How about a block mod? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy the cube blocks. Oh, I got a little ahead of myself. First thing we want to do is we want to make sure our folder settings are correct. So this is the root of our mod, which basically is parallel to the content folder. Okay, so essentially these two folders will be seen the same way by the Space Engineers client. So if we want to make a mod that uses a data file, which is what we're going to do, we'll come over here and we'll make a new folder, call it data. So open both of those, and then we'll go over and copy what we need to copy. So in this case, what I say we're going to do a block mod. We'll copy this file over here, and we'll get rid of this for the moment. And then you can edit this in your favorite program. Let's see. I have a bad feeling about this. And it looks like I'm going to be doing some editing. The QBlocks file is a very large file. And I think I had last run this program and had 2 copies of it running, so it's trying to load all that data, including the one I just tried to open. Okay, finally got the file open. Closed everything else out, so that should not be a problem for me again. Now, I'm using Notepad++. You can use any text editor. I like Notepad++ because it gives me a few options that normal text editors don't, or just plain old Notepad doesn't. One of those things is it lets me view files of whatever format I want in whatever language that I want. And by that I mean the markup language. So normally when you open an SBC with Notepad++, it doesn't have a language set. So that's probably not it'll probably just show up as plain text. Yeah, so this is what you'll see. And that's not really easy to work with. So you come in here and say, under language, say it's XML, and then you can see all the tags. And then you can also see these areas where it'll shrink things down by the tag, which is kind of handy if you're trying to go back and forth and copy paste stuff. So what I have running here is the copy that I made of the QBlocks file. So this is the original, and this one is my copy, and this is what we're running here. So you can see this is in my app data roaming, Space Engineers mods, and it's the 0_mod tutorial file. So when I make changes here, I don't have to worry about messing up the game. You can make changes over to your actual game files, but that's generally not a good idea. And at some point down the line, when they rewrite the dedicated server, if they see changes like that, you're not going to be able to join the server because your version is going to be off and your checksums are going to be all messed up. So, to make our basic mod, we need to find a block that we want to modify. want to shrink these up. And we'll see if there's something interesting to make a mod of. What does everybody like to mod these days? New stuff. Alright. Let's look for something. Let's try typing properly. There we go. Jump drive. So, like I said, we don't need most of this stuff. So everything above, I'm going to get rid of. Okay, I'm going to do this the faster way, which I hit shift and click where I want. And then everything after that. Also going to get rid of. Oop. Alright, so there's our jump drive. Now you need to have the XML file still needs to stay the same. So if you're going to have our definition here, and it's got to have the start and end tag. It's got to be within the cube blocks start and end tags, and it's got to be within a definitions start and end tag. Which the end tag for definitions is here. All this other stuff that's in here is, excuse me, the default block position within the G menu. So when you open up your G menu, and you'll see like certain things are always in certain places, they're hard coded here. So if you think on the right hand side of the G menu, 2 or 3 rows down, gyroscope is over on that side. It's always there because it's hard coded in here. And basically just gives the X and Y coordinates on that grid where that icon should be. But we don't need that, so I'm going to get rid of all these block positions as well. One thing I haven't quite figured out is how the block positions actually work. If you have 2 blocks that collide with one another, that both are mapped to the same spot, what happens? If you have no definition, where does that go? Does it go in the first available spot between hard-coded ones? Or what if you have 5 different definitions and none of them are set? How do they get sorted? I haven't quite figured that one out yet. Something I just don't feel like playing with at the moment. It's not that important to me where things are, especially now that we can search for them. So anyway, we've got our definitions, cube blocks, and definition without an S tag, and then definitions, cube blocks, and definition tag again. So this is all we need to do to make a basic mod. So I could save this right now, run it, and it would use my mod. However, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference between the one that's already in the game and this one because they're exactly the same. So we need to change them some way. Now you can change a lot of things in here without having to program and without having to know how to do 3D art or textures. These things we can't. These are models. Let's see. This has to remain the same. The ID, we can change this. And we probably will want to change this. Changing this has a couple different impacts. If you create a new subtype ID off of this jump drive and you start a game with this mod, you'll actually start with two jump drives. You'll start with the default one, and you'll have your modded one. If you want to replace the existing one, you leave the subtype ID the same, and it will override, usually, what's in the vanilla folder. If we want to make a secondary one, we can change this to, say, like V2. And this will set us just next to the existing one in the game. We want to make a custom name. When you see names in here with these underscores, it's something that's actually written in source code. And it grabs the reference to that name and it replaces it on the fly. I believe it's due to localization so that it grabs the correct name of the block in various languages. But you can override this and have it say whatever you want. So we'll go with that. Let's see. The icon. This is texture editing. Really not that bad. Save that for another tutorial, though. Excuse me. And then this is what size cube, what size grid this will work on. Large being station and large ship, small being small ship. Block topology, that has to do with how the block is displayed and how it's rendered, which is based on how you built the model. The size of the block. This particular block will be 3 tall by 3 long by 2 deep. I guess depending which way you look at it, those could be in any direction. This does not scale the block. All this does is it changes the bounding box of where that block sits. If you set this lower than the actual size of the block, you'll be able to clip through that block, and you won't have it should render outside of the actual box, but the collision mesh will probably be off and you'll be able to clip through the block, which can be not good if you're clipping through the control panel. So this you shouldn't change unless you are physically changing the model. Model offset, again, has to do with if you're changing the model that it actually uses. So this is the full functional model once it's completely built, with the detectors that allow you to have control panels and things like that already set up and configured. The next section, component cost. So this is something that you can modify. You can change out whatever components you have available to you. Change the numbers. Let's say you're making a really, really powerful jump drive. Let's see here. What do we have? Yeah, so let's say we wanted to make a super jump drive. Probably doesn't make sense to have it cost the same as a normal jump drive. So we might want to bump things up a little bit. And so let's make it really expensive. Let's go, say it requires 200 gravity generator components. Make it at 50 detectors. And all that extra stuff is going to require lots more math. So make it need 200 computers. Actually, I think 200 gravity generators is a bit much. Let's make it something more reasonable. About 50. critical component is the component which is needed for the block to be able to function. So as you go through and build a block, the first thing you need to lay it down is steel plate. Then it will go large tube, gravity generator, detector, small tube, and then computer. When it hits and you've completed and welded up all the computers, then you can actually fire the block, even though you still have things left to build. And there's an index number here as well. The index is which version you have. So let's say I wanted this to be, instead of computer, I wanted it to be steel plate. Now, I have two steel plates actually here, one at the beginning and one at the end. So I don't want it to be usable after 60 steel plates are added, but I may want to require that it be fully complete before it's usable. So in this case, this index is from 0. So this is the 0 count of steel plate. The next one that we have becomes number 1. So this index would change to a 1, which represents this second steel plate. If I had a third, and I wanted it to refer to this one, this would be index 2, because this one is 0, this one is 1, and this one is 2. I'm not going to do any of that, but we could. Let's put it back to computers. Next section, mount points. Mount points can get a little tricky. Maybe not tricky, maybe complex is a better word. This tells the game what side of the block you can mount to what. If you've ever tried to set up a refinery, a large refinery, they can be somewhat tricky because they don't always connect. There's certain blocks that have to touch other blocks in order for you to place it. Even though once you place it, you could take some of those blocks away, as long as it's touching in another place and it will be fine. This is the section that determines what face can be attached to what when you're actually building it. I'm going to ignore that for now. Then we have the progress models. These are the 3D models that show up as you're building and filling in, like it's doing here. So these are progress models over here that you're seeing being welded in the background. And then the final one, when the block is complete, is the actual model up here. We'll ignore those for now. Block pair name. This is mostly used for when you have, let's say, a block that you can use on both a large and a small grid. Say a good one would be, a good example of this would be the small reactor. If you go into your G menu, you'll see the small reactors there, but you don't see a separate large version and a separate small version. You just add small reactor to your toolbar, and then depending on what ship or what size grid you're pointing at when you go to place it, it will use either the large version or the small version, or the large ship version or the small ship version. So what you can do is you can create one block or two cube blocks in here. So I could actually create a whole separate jump drive, and we may actually do that. Specify that it's for a small ship, and as long as the pair name matches the type ID, or I'm sorry, as long as the pair name pairs up with the small version of this jump drive, then the two would share the same icon, and you could place it on a large or small ship. Although, maybe we won't do it, because you have to have a model for it that's sized appropriately for a small ship, and we don't. We could make one, but that's a little beyond the scope of what we're trying to do here. The next two, mirroring. These determine what axes this block will be placed on when you are in symmetry mode, in creative mode. So if you start a creative world, turn on symmetry, you can place this block on either the Z or Y axis, and it will place one in the same spot on the opposite side of your center line. It does not have an X because that could be silly. You don't necessarily want to jump drive in the same, you're 10 blocks away from the center on the front and the rear of the ship. You want it on the left and right, or on the top and bottom. Edge type, I think, is one of those things that's left over from the early alpha. I've played around with it and I've never seen any change in appearance of any of my mods. If it does do something, I'd be interested to know, but I haven't seen it yet. I've never made armor block mods, so it could have something to do with that, but again, I'm not sure. I've never played with it. Build time. So this is how long it actually takes to weld, and presumably to grind down. And this is at 1x settings. Now, because this has a computer in it, if you're not the owner, the hacking rules come into play, and it will take longer to grind down. But if you have all the components and start welding, it'll take 45 seconds to weld it completely. I think for a block this significant and as large as it is, because it's 3x3x2, that it should take a little bit more than 45 seconds to build up. So let's double that. Take a minute and a half to build a jump drive. Let's see if you can build a jump drive in a minute and a half. Damage effect. So this is something they added in a few patches ago. And when a block takes damage, if it has a damage effect ID, it will create some kind of particle effect from that block. And there's a lot of different damage effects that you can use. And you just have to play around to see which ones you like. I haven't really seen a map anywhere of which ones do what, but you can look, actually bring that back up, in the Space Engineers data folder. If I remember where the stuff is, it's not in data, it's going to be in... Is it effects? No. Is it even in effects? Might actually be in textures. Particles. Maybe not. I know it's here somewhere. I've seen it before. Well, anyway, there's a list somewhere in here that actually lists out all of the possible damage effects. Oh, maybe is that it? No. See if this will let me open this up in Notepad. No. Well, anyway, you can experiment by changing this number and seeing what happens. I seem to remember there being a list of what the damage effects were somewhere in one of these files. But there's a lot of subdirectories and a lot of files to look at. But even if you don't even if it's a weird file type, actually, see if is it damage. So even if it's a file type you don't know what it is, like a .h, you can open it up in Notepad, see if it's something that's editable or something that gives you some English to read, or whatever your language may happen to be. Yeah, this is nothing spectacularly useful for me. So, yeah, I think you're kind of on your own to find the damage IDs at the moment, but you can play with this number and change it to something else. So the next thing is the damage sound. In the Space Engineers content audio, you will have various things. Let's see here. Sound block, lights, alerts, enemy detected, objective complete. Let's see, this says particle weapon EXPL, so maybe explosion? Nope. Just cheat. Copy, search, audio. Must be one of the ones that's hard-coded. But you could include your own audio file and reference it. You just drop it in content audio, and I think you just need to add the path, just like it is here. So this starts assuming that you're in content. Remember I said they're parallel, so you could have you could just say audio / and then whatever your sound is. There's some specific rules for modding sound. The sample rate, whether or not certain sounds are stereo or mono. If you use a stereo sound where it expects a mono sound, you'll get an error in your log and your sound may not play. There's other tutorials that go into that a bit. I'm not think I've ever modded sound in a game, other than maybe swapping out music. Anyway, next one we have here is required power input. Well, since we're going to make a large version of this jump drive, and let's say we're going to double the distance. Usually you need to go double the distance. It's not double the power. It's kind of an exponential build. So instead of 32, let's make it 86. Somewhere between 2 and 3 times the amount of power. Power needed for jump. Well, this is a large, long distance jump drive, so let's say we actually need to have the full power. So that may not be right, because this is, well, we'll see. We can always come back and tweak this. Max jump distance, we said we're going to double this. So let's make that 4, and the jump mass. Let's go a little bit less than double. We'll just go with an even 200 instead of 125. Alright. So now I'm going to save this. And I need... Well, actually, this should work on its own. If I wanted to include a recipe in the assembler for it, so that I could just go and select this block and then tell it to build all the components of this block, I would also need, from the data folder, the block categories. And I would need to add my jump drive in here. So there's small blocks here, and this is a list of all the large blocks. So let's find jump drive. And then we'll add set ours with V2. Change actually that doesn't matter, but I'll do it anyway. Just make this a completely different class. So if I make the block pair name the same as the subtype ID, it should be its own entry. And I've got my jump drive, jump drive V2 matches my block pair name and my subtype ID. So now if I go and create a world, let's do asteroids, creative mode, mod tutorial test, and I usually set this stuff up first. Something special I want to do in here. Let's find the way it is. So we go to mods, and we make sure we add our new mod. And if we didn't screw anything up, we hit OK and go to load the game, it should load a new world. And we'll have our new jump drive in it. This is taking an unusually long time to load a map with just one mod in it. Alright. So we have our ship. Get out of our cockpit. And if we look for jump, regular jump drive and my big fat jump drive. Have to fix those. The OCD doesn't let me have bent walls. This thing's too big to fit on the inside of the ship. Bent walls. Take a look at our components. This is a little different. I thought it ended. Oh, you know what? I might have deleted that. Let me take a look. Back here to the Q block and look at what components we had. Interesting. It did not used to do this. You used to be able to have multiple instances in different building stages of the same component, but in this case it seems to have combined the 60 that we listed with the 20, and now it shows 80 down here in the corner. It does have our 200 computers. Place this block. Right. Go look at this block. Yeah, so it has our 200 computers. Oh, and it put the 60 steel plates on the bottom and on the top. Okay. So that was just the totals. That's what it was. Yeah, so if I look in here, it's giving me 80 total. To build it, it's not giving me all the different stages. Look at the block once it's been placed. Yeah, you can see it's got 60 at the bottom, steel plate, and 20 at the top, so that makes our 80. Now, if we look at the controls in this block, our required input is 86 megawatts. We currently have a maximum of 86. Got 4.9 megawatts going in and not much saved. It'll take us 22 hours to fully recharge, and that's off of the little power that's output by this generator right here. Sorry, this reactor. This can put out a maximum of 5 megawatts. And what do we need here? What do we define this to say? We said we needed to have 86 megawatts. So, if we make this comically silly and put a giant reactor on the back of it. Now this reactor is going to generate 100 megawatts. now we have absolutely no jump distance because, well, we said we had to have a full charge first. We had to have 86 megawatts charged and stored in this device before we could use it. Now, if I could go back and make some tweaks to my mod, and I can just save. Say I want to save here. Let's do this. Let's say I determined that, since I'm jumping such a long distance, maybe I want to double the amount of detector components. So what I do is I'll save, do a quick save here. Notice that we've got 50 detector components right now. So I go back to my mod. Let's make that 120. Not 1200. Save. And then we'll just do a quick load. Quick is a relative term. Alright, and our detector components are now 120. So you can play around, tweak, save the game, reload it, and pretty much see your changes happen instantly. Now my game's obviously taking a little bit of time to reload and load the first time because I am recording full resolution for this video. And that's 2560 by 1600. So that slows Space Engineers down a bit. One other thing I want to do. So we had an hour left. Adding one large reactor took us from 22 hours to 1 hour. My toolbar reset. You know when that happens. So what will adding another large reactor do? Still 1 hour. So you're probably wondering, well, why didn't that change? If you have double the power now, a little more than double, it should have, gone down by almost as much as it went down from 22 to 1 hour. But that's because we set the input at 86 megawatts. So those large generators put out, was it 100 megawatts? Large reactor puts out 100 megawatts. So it's one large reactor's supplying the 86 megawatts that are required, which is the maximum amount that you can stuff into that thing at a time. So we'd have to wait a full hour to get there, which we're not going to do. We're going to assume this is going to work, and it's going to jump us as far as we want to, unless there's any Space Engineers bugs that we run into, which is always fun. But that pretty much finishes our mod. Now we can get a little bit more complex. We can add some more texture to this if we wanted to, open up Photoshop or GIMP. We can change the colors of some things. We can make this a colorable block, which actually might already be. Yeah, it is. We could add some logos onto it if we wanted to. Just by swapping out the texture. As long as the texture file stays the same and the UV map stays the same, meaning that you don't move around and rescale the photo or the image that you're working on. If you just did a color change or applied like a graphic label over top of the existing graphic without moving pieces of that graphic around, and combine the layers, it would just display just fine. You wouldn't have to rebuild the model. If you want to do more extensive changes to the texturing, then you'd have to actually rebuild the model, and you'd have to look at the Space Engineer's tools to get the models, and you'd have to build them in some program. Well, actually, yeah, you'd have to build them in a different program if you want to make the textures actually map to the right spots of the model. And that's a problem for a whole other day. So I hope this was helpful, at least having some of the tips and tricks in there. And we'll see what we can come up with for next time. So before I go, we should probably talk about publishing. So we have our mod. Not that one. That one. So we have our mod. We can use it in a world, but how do we get it up on the workshop? You don't have to do any of the renaming or putting it in a zip file or any of that stuff. All you need to do to add it is fake like you're going to load a world, or create a new world, but basically you just want to not do what I just did. Yeah, let's just kill this. Try that one more time. It's still running. So anyway, what you want to do is fake like you're going to load a world. And instead of actually clicking load like I did, I'm going to edit settings. Then mods, and select your local mod that you want to upload. It's not over here. It's over here because it's in this world. Just select your mod and then hit publish, and then you can follow through from there. Give it a name, give it graphics, whatever you want to do. So that concludes our making a simple tutorial. And for a simple tutorial, this looked like it took a very long time to make. But you can probably get a lot more done if you're not listening to me talk. So, I'm going to sign off, and we'll see you next time.